Baby saw a bear cub stuck in a carnival game machine. What he did next left everyone speechless. The evening air carried the scent of caramel apples and fresh popcorn as Ethan Marshall pushed the stroller along the worn wooden boardwalk of Willow Creek's traveling carnival. His wife, Lily Morgan, walked beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm, while their 8-month-old son gurgled happily between them. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold and amber that made the whole world look like it had been dipped in honey. The carnival wasn't like the modern amusement parks with their screaming roller coasters and flashing neon lights. This one felt different, older somehow, as if it had stepped out of a photograph from 50 years ago. The carousel horses were painted by hand with real horsehair tails that swayed in the breeze. The game booths were made of actual wood that creaked when you leaned against them. Even the music that drifted from the speakers sounded like it came from an old music box, tinny and sweet and somehow perfect for this particular evening. Ethan had grown up in Willow Creek, and he remembered this carnival from when he was a boy. It came every autumn, appearing overnight in the field behind the old elementary school like magic. He used to save his allowance for weeks just to play the ring toss and eat cotton candy until his stomach hurt. Now he was here with his own family, watching his son's eyes grow wide at all the colors and sounds. The baby reached out his chubby fingers toward everything they passed, making soft cooing sounds that made other carnival goers smile as they walked by. Lily had never been to this particular carnival before. She'd moved to Willow Creek only 3 years ago, when she'd taken a job at the local library. That's where she'd met Ethan, who came in every Tuesday to read stories to the children during story hour. She'd fallen in love with his gentle voice and the way he did all the character voices without any embarrassment. Now, here they were, married with a baby, walking through this strange and wonderful place that seemed to exist outside of normal time. The carnival wasn't crowded that evening. A few families wandered between the booths, and teenagers clustered around the basketball game trying to win oversized stuffed animals. The operators of the various games and rides moved with an unhurried grace, as if they had all the time in the world. One of them, an elderly woman with silver hair braided down her back, caught Ethan's eye and smiled. There was something knowing in that smile, something that made him feel like she could see right through him to all his hopes and fears. But it wasn't an uncomfortable feeling. It was more like being seen and accepted exactly as he was. The baby suddenly let out a delighted squeal, his whole body wiggling with excitement in the stroller. His tiny hands reached forward, grasping at the air, and both Ethan and Lily followed his gaze to see what had captured his attention so completely. There, tucked between a booth selling handmade jewelry and another offering face painting, stood a claw machine. But this wasn't just any claw machine. The glass case glowed with a soft, warm light that seemed to come from within rather than from any visible bulbs. The machine itself looked ancient, made of dark wood, with brass corners that had been polished until they gleamed. Instead of the usual cheap stuffed animals piled haphazardly inside, this machine contained something that made both parents stop in their tracks. Sitting in the center of the machine, surrounded by what looked like stars made of crystal, was a bear cub. Not a stuffed bear cub, not a toy. A real, living, breathing bear cub with soft brown fur and eyes that blinked slowly as it looked back at them through the glass. Lily's hand tightened on Ethan's arm. Her first instinct was to pull the stroller away, to protect their baby from what surely must be dangerous. But something about the scene held her in place. The bear cub didn't look distressed. It sat calmly on its haunches, its head tilted slightly to one side, as if it was just as curious about them as they were about it. The cub was small, probably only a few months old, with fur that looked impossibly soft even through the glass. Its ears twitched occasionally, and its nose wiggled as if it could smell the popcorn and cotton candy through the machine's walls. The baby continued reaching toward the machine, making happy babbling sounds that almost seemed like he was trying to talk to the cub. The cub's eyes shifted from the parents to the baby, and something changed in its expression. If Ethan didn't know better, he would have sworn the cub smiled. "This can't be real," Lily whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was. She could see the cub's chest rising and falling with each breath. She could see the way its fur ruffled slightly in some unfelt breeze within the machine. This was no illusion, no trick of light or clever animatronic. This was a living creature, somehow existing inside what should have been an ordinary carnival game. Ethan looked around, expecting to see crowds gathering, people pulling out their phones to record this impossible sight. But the few people who passed by seemed not to notice anything unusual at all. They walked past the machine without a second glance, as if a bear cub in a claw machine was the most normal thing in the world. Only their baby seemed to truly see what was there, his excitement growing with each passing second. The cub stood up on all four paws and padded closer to the glass, stopping right where the baby was reaching. It pressed its small black nose against the glass, leaving a tiny fog mark that faded slowly. The baby laughed, a pure, delighted sound that seemed to echo strangely in the evening air. The laugh didn't just sound happy, it sounded like recognition, like greeting an old friend after a long absence. Ethan found himself kneeling down beside the stroller, bringing himself to the baby's eye level. From this angle, he could see more clearly into the machine. The crystal stars weren't just decorations. They seemed to pulse with a gentle light, creating patterns that shifted and changed like constellations. The floor of the machine wasn't the usual metal grating, but what looked like soft moss dotted with tiny wildflowers. It was as if someone had taken a piece of forest and somehow fitted it inside this impossible space. "Should we tell someone?" Lily asked, though she wasn't sure who they would tell or what they would say. "How did you explain that there was a bear cub in a claw machine? How did you make someone understand that it didn't seem wrong or cruel, but somehow right?" As if in answer to her question, a voice spoke from behind them. "Beautiful evening for a visit, isn't it?" They turned to see a man standing there, wearing the burgundy vest that marked him as one of the carnival operators. He was older, perhaps in his 70s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and hands that showed the calluses of a lifetime of work. His name tag read, "Mr. Holloway, owner," in faded gold letters. Mr. Holloway didn't seem surprised to see them standing there, staring at his impossible claw machine. He walked over slowly, his cane making soft tapping sounds on the ground. When he reached them, he didn't look at the machine but at the baby, who had turned his attention to this new arrival while still keeping one hand stretched toward the glass. "Your son has a gift," Mr. Holloway said simply, as if this explained everything. "Not many can see what's really there. Most people walk by and see only what they expect to see. Stuffed animals, plastic toys, the ordinary prizes of an ordinary game. But some souls, especially the very young ones who haven't yet learned what's impossible, they see the truth." Ethan stood up slowly, his mind racing with questions. "The bear cub, is it safe? How did it get in there? Why is it in there?" Mr. Holloway chuckled, a warm sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Safe as houses, I assure you. Safer than it would be anywhere else in this world. As for how and why, well, that's a longer story than we have time for tonight. Let's just say that sometimes the universe puts things exactly where they need to be, even if we don't understand why." He moved closer to the machine, placing one weathered hand on the glass. The cub immediately came over, pressing its paw against the glass where Mr. Holloway's hand rested. "This little one has been waiting," he said softly, "waiting for the right moment, the right connection. Animals know things we've forgotten how to know. They can sense the pure hearts, the ones who still believe in magic because they haven't been taught not to." The baby made a soft sound, almost like he was agreeing, and both his parents felt a shiver run through them that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. There was something happening here, something beyond their understanding but not beyond their feeling. They could sense it in the air around them, in the way the lights of the carnival seemed to dim everything except this small circle where they stood. Lily found herself moving closer to the machine, drawn by something she couldn't name. When she looked into the cub's eyes, she saw not an animal trapped, but a being exactly where it chose to be. The cub blinked slowly at her, and she felt tears prick at her eyes, though she couldn't say why. Can our son touch the glass?" she asked Mr. Holloway. The old man's eyes twinkled. "I think that would be a very good idea," he said, and there was something in his voice that suggested this was what he had been waiting for all along. Ethan lifted the baby from the stroller, his small weight familiar and comforting in his arms. The baby immediately leaned toward the machine, his hands opening and closing in anticipation. When Ethan brought him close enough, the baby placed both palms flat against the glass, and the cub did the same from the other side. The moment their paws and palms aligned, separated only by the glass, something extraordinary happened. The light inside the machine grew brighter, but it wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm and golden, like sunlight through autumn leaves. The crystal stars began to spin slowly, creating patterns that seemed to tell a story without words. The baby was completely silent, his eyes wide and unblinking as he stared at the cub. The cub, too, was perfectly still, except for a gentle rumbling that might have been purring if bears purred. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, two young souls communicating in a language older than speech. Around them, the carnival continued its gentle evening rhythm, but it felt distant, muffled, as if they were inside a bubble of quiet wonder. "What are they doing?" Ethan whispered, afraid to break whatever spell was being woven. Mr. Holloway smiled, his eyes reflecting the golden light from the machine. "They're remembering," he said simply. "Remembering what we all knew once, before we learned to doubt. That all living things are connected, that love doesn't need words, that magic is just another word for the miracles we see every day if we're paying attention." The baby suddenly laughed again, bright and clear, and the cub seemed to laugh too in its own way, its mouth opening in what was definitely a smile. Then, as gently as it had begun, the moment started to fade. The light dimmed back to its soft glow. The stars slowed their spinning, and the baby pulled his hands back, satisfied in a way that suggested he had accomplished something important. But the evening wasn't over yet. As Ethan settled the baby back in the stroller, Mr. Holloway reached into his pocket and pulled out something that caught the light. It was a token, made of what looked like brass but felt warm to the touch, as if it had been sitting in sunlight. On one side was etched a bear, on the other a child's handprint. "For when the time is right," he said, pressing it into Lily's hand, "the machine will know." Lily wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression suggested that she would understand when she needed to. She tucked the token into her pocket, where it seemed to pulse with its own gentle warmth. They stayed by the machine a while longer, watching as the cub curled up in a corner of its impossible habitat, apparently ready for sleep. The baby, too, was growing drowsy, his earlier excitement giving way to the heavy-lidded contentment of a child who had experienced something wonderful. Other people continued to pass by, some stopping briefly to look at what they saw as a particularly realistic stuffed animal display, others not noticing at all. It was as if the truth of the machine revealed itself only to those who were ready to see it. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Ethan and Lily knew it was time to go home. But they also knew they would be back. There was something unfinished here, something the token in Lily's pocket promised. "Thank you," Lily said to Mr. Holloway, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was thanking him for. He nodded, understanding anyway. "The carnival will be here for another week," he said. "Take your time. Some things shouldn't be rushed." As they walked away, pushing the stroller with their now sleeping baby, they could hear the gentle music of the carousel mixing with the distant laughter of children. The bear cub was still visible through the glass, a small brown shape in a pool of golden light. And though they didn't turn back to look, both parents had the strangest feeling that it was watching them go, patient and peaceful, knowing they would return. The walk home was quiet, both Ethan and Lily lost in their own thoughts about what they had witnessed. The baby slept soundly, occasionally making small sounds that might have been echoes of his conversation with the cub. The token in Lily's pocket continued its warm pulsing, a reminder that what they had experienced was real, not some shared dream. The ordinary streets of Willow Creek looked different somehow, touched by the possibility of magic. Every tree seemed to hold secrets. Every shadow might hide wonders. They had entered the carnival as a normal family, out for an evening stroll. They were leaving it changed, carrying with them the knowledge that the world was far stranger and more beautiful than they had imagined. That night, after they had put the baby to bed, Ethan and Lily sat together on their porch, looking up at the stars. They didn't need to talk about what had happened. They both understood that some experiences were beyond words. But Lily pulled out the token and held it up to the moonlight, watching how it seemed to capture and hold the silver glow. "Do you think," she started, then stopped, unsure how to finish the question. Ethan took her hand, the one holding the token, and squeezed gently. "I think our son saw something we've forgotten how to see," he said. "And maybe, if we're lucky, he'll teach us to remember." Inside the house, the baby slept peacefully in his crib, and in his dreams, a small bear cub ran through fields of crystal stars. They played together in that space between waking and sleeping, where all things are possible, and magic is as natural as breathing. The token on the nightstand beside his parents' bed glowed softly through the night, a promise of wonders yet to come. The carnival would be there tomorrow, and the day after that, and for a few more days beyond. But Ethan and Lily somehow knew that when they returned, it would be for something more than just another look at an impossible bear cub in an impossible machine. They would be returning to finish a story that had only just begun, a story written in the language of innocence and wonder that their son still spoke fluently. The next morning came soft and gray, with a light mist that made everything look like a watercolor painting. The baby woke happy, babbling to himself in his crib with unusual enthusiasm. When Lily went to get him, she found him holding his hands up, palms out, the same way he had pressed them against the glass of the machine. She lifted him, and he immediately turned toward the window, as if he could see the carnival from here, though it was miles away on the other side of town. "You want to go back, don't you?" she whispered to him, and he gurgled in what sounded like agreement. Ethan was already in the kitchen, making breakfast, but his mind wasn't on the eggs he was scrambling. He kept thinking about Mr. Holloway's words, about seeing what's really there versus what we expect to see. How much of life did they miss because they had learned to see only the ordinary? How many miracles walked past them every day, invisible because they had forgotten how to look. Lily came in carrying the baby, who reached for Ethan with his usual morning enthusiasm. As Ethan took his son, he noticed something different. The baby's eyes seemed brighter somehow, more aware. It was as if his encounter with the cub had awakened something in him, some deeper understanding of the world around him. Throughout the morning, the baby kept making a particular sound, a soft huffing noise that sounded remarkably like the breathing they had heard from the cub. He would make the sound, then pause, as if listening for a response that only he could hear. By afternoon, neither Ethan nor Lily could concentrate on anything else. The token sat on the kitchen table between them, warm and inviting. Finally, Lily picked it up and stood. "Let's go," she said simply, and Ethan nodded, already reaching for the baby. The carnival looked different in daylight. The mystery of evening was replaced by a kind of cheerful shabbiness that made it feel even more real. They could see the patches on the tent roofs, the paint peeling slightly on the game booths, the way everything had been mended and maintained with care rather than replaced. It was a carnival that had been loved into its current state, worn smooth by countless hands and feet and hearts. Mr. Holloway was standing by the entrance as if he had been expecting them. He smiled when he saw them approaching, and the baby immediately started making his huffing sound, louder now, more insistent. "Ah," Mr. Holloway said, "he's been calling, and someone has been answering." They walked through the carnival, past the ring toss and the duck pond, past the cotton candy stand where the smell of spun sugar made the baby clap his hands. Other visitors moved around them, but again, none seemed to notice anything unusual about their destination. The claw machine stood exactly where it had been, looking perfectly ordinary except for the extraordinary inhabitant visible through its glass. The bear cub was awake, sitting up alert, its ears perked forward. When it saw them approaching, it stood and moved to the front of the machine, its movements eager but not frantic. It had been waiting, but it was a patient waiting, the kind that knows its moment will come. The baby practically vibrated with excitement in Ethan's arms, reaching for the machine before they were even close. When they finally stood before it, the cub and the baby regarded each other with what could only be described as joy. Pure, simple, uncomplicated joy at being reunited with a friend. Lily pulled out the token, which was now almost hot in her hand. She looked at Mr. Holloway questioningly. "The token goes here," he said, indicating a slot in the side of the machine that she hadn't noticed before. It was exactly the right size for the token, worn smooth by use. "But I should tell you, once you use it, things will change. Not in any frightening way," he added quickly, seeing their concerned expressions. "But the world will become a bit larger, a bit more wonderful. Your son already sees it. The question is whether you're ready to see it too." Ethan and Lily looked at each other, then at their son, who was making his huffing sound again, answered by a similar sound from the cub. The decision was already made, had been made the moment they first saw the impossible made real. Lily slipped the token into the slot, and it disappeared with a soft musical chime that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the glass front of the machine began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. The shimmer spread until the entire front of the machine looked like a vertical pool of water, clear but somehow permeable. The cub stepped forward, and instead of hitting glass, its paw passed through the shimmer as if it wasn't there at all. The baby laughed, that same pure sound from the night before, and reached out his hand. The cub reached out its paw, and when they touched, skin to fur with no barrier between them, the world exploded into color and light and sound that only they could fully perceive. But Ethan and Lily caught the edges of it, like seeing a rainbow from the corner of your eye. They saw the connections between all living things, golden threads that ran from heart to heart. They saw how the cub wasn't trapped, but was a guardian, watching over this thin place where the ordinary world touched something far more vast. They saw how their son had known this all along, had recognized a kindred spirit who stood between worlds just as he did, new to this life, but old in ways that had nothing to do with time. The touch lasted only a moment before the cub pulled back, but it was enough. The shimmer solidified back into glass, but now they could all see through it properly. The space inside the machine wasn't small at all. It opened onto a forest that stretched as far as the eye could see, full of wonders they could only glimpse. The cub was free to roam that forest, but chose to stay here, at this window between worlds, waiting for moments like this. Waiting for children who still knew how to see, who could remind their parents that magic wasn't something you had to believe in because it simply was, as real as breath and heartbeat. "He's not stuck," the baby seemed to say, though of course he couldn't speak yet. But his parents understood anyway. The cub was exactly where it wanted to be, serving as a bridge, a reminder, a teacher for those who had forgotten. It would be here as long as the carnival traveled, as long as there were children who could see and parents willing to remember. Mr. Holloway was smiling broadly now, tears glinting in his eyes. "It's been so long since someone used a token," he said softly. "So long since someone was brave enough to let the magic back in. Your son is special, but not unique. There are others like him, scattered across the world, keeping the doorways open, and now you know. Now you can help him grow up without losing what he knows." They stayed until the sun began to set again, watching the cub play in its forest, occasionally coming back to the glass to check on the baby. Other children began to notice now, drawn by something they couldn't name. They would stand transfixed, seeing not quite what the baby saw, but more than they had before. Their parents would pull them away, confused and slightly frightened by their children's insistence that there was a real bear in the machine. But the seeds were planted. Some of those children would dream of forests and cubs and golden light. Some would remember when they were older that magic had once been real, even if just for a moment. As they prepared to leave, Mr. Holloway handed them something else. It was a photograph, old and slightly yellowed, showing a young boy standing in front of the same machine. The boy was pressing his hand to the glass, and on the other side, barely visible, was the same cub, or perhaps its parent or grandparent, the cycles of guardianship stretching back generations. "That's me," Mr. Holloway said. 60 years ago, I used my token then, and I've been traveling with this carnival ever since, making sure the doorways stay open. Your son won't need to do what I did. The world is changing, becoming ready to remember again, but he'll have his own part to play, and you'll help him play it." They left as the stars began to appear, the baby drowsy but still making his soft huffing sounds. The cub watched them go from its forest, and somehow they knew it would be there whenever they needed to remember that the world was larger than they thought. The token was gone, but what it had unlocked remained. The ability to see beyond the ordinary, to recognize magic in its everyday clothes, to know that their son's innocent wisdom was not something to be outgrown, but something to be preserved and shared. The walk home was different this time. They could see the threads connecting everything, faint but visible if they didn't look too hard. They could hear the conversations between the trees, the songs the stars sang to each other. It was overwhelming and wonderful, and exactly as much as they could handle. That night, the baby slept peacefully, and in his dreams, he ran through forests of starlight with his friend. They spoke in the language that existed before words, the language of connection and recognition and pure being. And sometimes, if his parents listened carefully, they could hear him laughing in his sleep, answered by an echo that might have been wind or might have been something more. The carnival would leave in a few days, traveling to the next town, carrying its doorways and guardians with it. But what it had awakened would remain. The baby would grow up knowing that magic was real, and his parents would help him keep that knowledge. They would tell him stories that were true even if they never happened, teach him to see with his heart as well as his eyes, show him that the world was full of bears and machines and so much more. Years later, when the baby was no longer a baby but a young child with bright eyes and an infectious laugh, he would tell his friends about the bear cub in the machine. Most wouldn't believe him, but some would. And those some would look a little more carefully at the world around them, would notice the thin places where magic leaked through. They would become the next generation of seers and believers, keeping the doorways open for those who would come after. But that was still to come. For now, there was just a family who had been given a gift they hadn't known they needed, a glimpse beyond the veil, a reminder that wonder wasn't something you grew out of, but something you grew into if you were brave enough. The token was gone, but Lily found that her pocket still felt warm where it had been. When she reached inside, she found a small smooth stone that hadn't been there before. It was ordinary granite, nothing special except for the way it held heat and the tiny flecks of gold that caught the light. A reminder, a promise, a key to remembering. She placed it on the mantel next to the photograph Mr. Holloway had given them, and sometimes, late at night, they could swear they heard it humming softly, the same tune the carousel played, the same rhythm as a bear cub's heart. The world was exactly as it had always been, and completely different. They walked the same streets, lived in the same house, did the same things. But now they did them with the knowledge that miracles were everywhere, waiting to be noticed. The baby grew day by day. And with each new word he learned, he tried to explain what he had seen and felt. His parents helped him, gave him the vocabulary for wonder, taught him that what he knew was precious and true. And sometimes, when the wind was right and the evening light fell just so, they could see it again. The golden threads connecting everything, the doorways standing open, the magic that had always been there, waiting for someone with eyes to see. The story of the bear cub in the machine became a family legend, told and retold, each time revealing new details, new meanings. It became the story of how they learned to see, how they remembered what they had forgotten, how they discovered that the world was far more beautiful and strange than they had dared to imagine. And always, at the center of it, was the image of a baby's palm pressed against glass, meeting a paw on the other side, two young souls recognizing each other across the divide between worlds. The baby grew, but never forgot. He carried that moment with him, a seed of magic that would bloom throughout his life in unexpected ways. He would see things others missed, know things others had forgotten, believe things others thought impossible. And always, always he would remember the bear cub who had shown him that the world was full of wonders, if only you knew how to look. Some nights, when the moon was full and the air was clear, they would walk to the field where the carnival had been. It was empty now, just grass and wildflowers, but if they stood very still and listened very carefully, they could hear it. The distant music of a carousel, the laughter of children, the soft huffing of a bear cub calling to its friend. The carnival was gone, but never really gone, traveling its circuit, carrying its magic to other towns, other children, other families ready to remember. And somewhere, in a machine that was both smaller and larger than it appeared, a bear cub waited at the window between worlds, patient and eternal, ready for the next child who could see, the next family brave enough to use their token, the next moment when the ordinary world would crack open just enough to let the magic through. 2 chapters of mentioned part has completed. The story had changed them in ways they were still discovering. Lily found that she could sense things now. Small moments of magic in everyday life. The way birds would pause to look at her as if considering whether to share their secrets. The way flowers seemed to turn toward the baby when he laughed. The way certain places in town felt thin, as if you could push through them into somewhere else entirely if you just knew how. Ethan discovered that his Tuesday story hours at the library had become something more. The children listened with a different quality of attention, as if they could hear truths beneath the tales. Some of them would stay after, whispering about bears and machines and asking if magic was real. He would smile and tell them to keep their eyes open. That magic was everywhere for those who knew how to look. The baby, as he grew into a toddler, showed signs of remembering everything. He would sometimes stop in the middle of playing, cock his head as if listening to something only he could hear, then smile and wave at empty air. Except it wasn't empty, not really. His parents had learned to trust his vision, to know that he was seeing and greeting things they could only glimpse. Friends who still moved between worlds, guardians who watched over the thin places, the endless web of connection that held everything together. They thought about Mr. Holloway often, wondering where the carnival was now, what other families were discovering the impossible claw machine. They knew he was out there, an old man with kind eyes and infinite patience, waiting for the next child who could see, the next parents ready to remember. Sometimes they received postcards from towns they'd never heard of, with no message except a small drawing of a bear paw. They knew who sent them, and they kept each one, a map of magic moving through the world. The stone on their mantel continued its quiet humming, a sound that had become so familiar they only noticed it when it stopped. Which it did, occasionally, usually right before something wonderful happened, like the day a butterfly landed on the baby's nose and stayed there for a full minute, its wings moving in time with his breathing. Or the afternoon when all the neighborhood cats gathered in their backyard, sitting in a perfect circle around the toddler as he played, as if protecting him. Or the morning when they woke to find tiny flowers growing in impossible places, on the kitchen table, along the windowsills, spelling out words in a language none of them could read, but all of them somehow understood. Life went on, ordinary and extraordinary in equal measure. The baby learned to walk, then run, then climb, always reaching for something just beyond what others could see. His first word wasn't mama or dada, but something that sounded like the huffing sound the bear cub had made. His parents weren't surprised. They knew he was speaking to friends they couldn't quite see, maintaining connections that most people forgot the moment they learned to doubt. They protected this in him, this ability to see beyond, even when other parents looked at them strangely. Even when teachers suggested he might be too imaginative, too prone to fantasy. They knew better. They knew he wasn't making things up but was simply seeing what was already there. On his 3rd birthday, something remarkable happened. They were having a small party in the backyard, just family and a few close friends, when the wind suddenly stilled. Everything became quiet, that particular quality of quiet that they recognized now as the world holding its breath. The toddler stood up from where he'd been playing, walked to the center of the yard, and held out his hand. And there, materializing as if it had always been there but they'd just now noticed, was a small bear cub. Not the same one from the machine. This one was smaller, younger, made of light and shadow and something in between. It nuzzled the toddler's hand, and he giggled, that same pure sound from that first night at the carnival. Then, as quickly as it had come, it faded, leaving only the memory and the absolute certainty that it had been real. The other children at the party had seen it too. They talked about it in hushed, excited whispers, despite their parents' attempts to convince them it had been a trick of light, a shared imagination. But children know truth when they see it, and these children would remember. They would grow up knowing that their friend could see things they couldn't quite see, could touch worlds they could only dream about. Some would forget as they grew older, but others would remember and would keep their eyes open for their own moments of magic. The toddler's ability grew stronger as he aged. By the time he was 4, animals would come to him without fear. Birds would land on his shoulders. Squirrels would eat from his hands. Even the grumpiest neighborhood dog would roll over for belly rubs when he approached. It wasn't that he commanded them. It was that he spoke their language, the one that existed before words, the one he'd learned that night with the bear cub. His parents watched him with a mixture of pride and worry. They knew the world wasn't always kind to those who saw differently, who knew things others had forgotten. But they also knew that what he had was precious beyond measure, a gift not just for him but for everyone he would touch throughout his life. They did their best to prepare him, teaching him when to share what he saw and when to keep it to himself, how to help others see without frightening them, how to keep his magic while still living in a world that had largely forgotten its own. And through it all, the photograph on the mantel watched over them, young Mr. Holloway with his hand on the glass, a reminder that this path had been walked before and would be walked again. When the boy was 5, the carnival returned to Willow Creek. They knew it was coming before any posters appeared, before any announcements were made. The stone on the mantel had stopped humming 3 days earlier, and the boy had been drawing pictures of bears and machines and golden light. When they walked onto the carnival grounds that first evening, it was like coming home. Everything was exactly as they remembered, but also subtly different, as if it had grown and changed in its travels just as they had grown and changed in its absence. Mr. Holloway was there, looking not a day older, his eyes twinkling with the same knowing light. He knelt down when he saw the boy, now walking on his own, eyes bright with recognition and joy. "Hello, young guardian," Mr. Holloway said softly, and the boy smiled. That radiant smile that suggested he understood exactly what that meant. They walked together to the claw machine, which stood in the same spot between the jewelry booth and the face painting stand. The bear cub was there, larger now, but unmistakably the same creature, its eyes lighting up when it saw them approaching. The boy didn't need to touch the glass this time. The connection was already there, had been there since that first meeting, maintained across distance and time by something stronger than physical proximity. He stood before the machine and made the huffing sound, and the cub responded, and they had a conversation that needed no translation. Other families gathered, drawn by something they couldn't name. Children pressed forward, eyes wide, seeing various degrees of what was really there. Some saw a very realistic stuffed animal. Others saw something moving. A precious few saw the truth, a living being in an impossible space, a guardian at the gateway between worlds. The boy turned to these children, the ones who could truly see, and smiled at them. He reached out his hands, and they reached back, and for a moment they were all connected, a circle of young souls who still knew how to believe. The golden threads became visible to everyone in that circle, and gasps of wonder rose from children and parents alike. "This is why we travel," Mr. Holloway said to Ethan and Lily. "To find them, to wake them up, to remind them. Your son is special, but he's not alone. There are others like him everywhere, waiting to remember, waiting to see. The world is changing, becoming ready for magic again, and these children, they're the ones who will help it remember." The boy spent the next hour teaching the other children the huffing sound, showing them how to see with their hearts as well as their eyes. Some learned quickly, others struggled, but all of them left changed. Seeds had been planted that would grow in their own time, in their own way. As the evening wore on and the crowds thinned, Mr. Holloway pulled Ethan and Lily aside. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his vest pocket. He pulled out 3 tokens, identical to the one they had used years before. "Not for the machine," he explained. "These are different. These are for when he's older, when he needs to find others like himself. There are other carnivals, other guardians, other doorways. These will help him find them when the time is right." Lily took the tokens, feeling their familiar warmth. "How will we know when the time is right?" she asked. Mr. Holloway smiled. "You'll know, he'll know. The tokens will know. Trust the magic. It's never wrong, just sometimes hard to understand." They stayed until the carnival closed that night. The boy saying goodbye to the bear cub with promises to return tomorrow and the day after that, and every day until the carnival moved on. As they walked home under a star-filled sky, the boy between his parents, holding both their hands, he looked up and said his first complete sentence. "The bear cub says the world is waking up." His parents exchanged glances over his head, wondering what that meant, knowing they would find out in time. For now, it was enough to know that their son was part of something beautiful and vast, something that connected all living things in ways they were only beginning to understand. The carnival stayed for a week, and they went every night. Each time, more children gathered around the machine. Each time, the circle of those who could see grew larger. By the last night, there were dozens of children and their parents, all connected by the golden threads, all seeing the magic that had always been there. The local news even did a story about the unusual attraction at the carnival, though they couldn't quite explain what made it so special. The reporters' cameras couldn't capture what the children saw, but they captured the wonder on their faces, the joy in their eyes, and that was enough to make others curious. The ripples were spreading. On the final night, something extraordinary happened. As the boy stood before the machine for the last time, the glass shimmered again, just as it had when his parents used the token. But this time, no token had been inserted. The shimmer spread until the entire front of the machine became permeable, and the bear cub stepped through. It walked out into the carnival, solid and real and impossible, and no one ran. No one screamed. Everyone who was there simply accepted it, as if they had been waiting for this moment all their lives. The cub walked straight to the boy, and they embraced, fur and skin, wild and tame, magic and mundane all coming together in a moment of perfect unity. Then the cub spoke, not in words, but in images and feelings that everyone present could understand. It showed them the world as it really was, alive and conscious and interconnected in ways that took their breath away. It showed them how every act of kindness rippled outward, how every moment of wonder strengthened the fabric of reality, how every child who remembered to see helped the world remember itself. It showed them that they were not separate from nature but part of it, not observers of magic but participants in it. The vision lasted only moments, but it changed everyone who experienced it. When it ended, the cub walked back through the shimmer, which solidified once more into glass. But now everyone could see through it properly, could see the forest that stretched beyond, could see the other guardians moving through the trees. Mr. Holloway was crying openly now, tears of joy streaming down his weathered face. 60 years, he said. 60 years I've been waiting for this, for enough people to see at once, for the collective remembering to begin. Your son, he's the catalyst. He's the one we've been waiting for, not to save the world but to remind it how to save itself. The boy looked up at his parents, his eyes ancient and young at the same time. "Can we follow the carnival?" he asked. "Can we help wake up more people?" His parents looked at each other, thinking of their jobs, their house, their normal life. Then they looked at their son, at Mr. Holloway, at all the families around them whose eyes had been opened. The decision was easier than they thought it would be. "Not follow," Lily said, "but we can visit. We can find the other carnivals, the other doorways. We can help in our own way, from our own place." The boy nodded, satisfied. He understood that everyone had their role to play, and theirs was to be bridges between the magical and the mundane, to help others see while still maintaining their place in the ordinary world. They were translators, interpreters, guides for those ready to remember. As the carnival began to pack up that night, families exchanged contact information, made plans to meet, to share what they had learned. A community was forming, united by a shared vision, a common understanding that the world was far more than they had been taught. Children who had been strangers an hour ago were now friends bound by magic. Parents who had been skeptics were now believers. The ripples were becoming waves. The boy said goodbye to Mr. Holloway with a hug that lasted a long time. "I'll see you again," the boy said with certainty. "Yes," Mr. Holloway agreed, "many times, in many places. The road is long, but it always circles back." He handed the boy something, a small wooden whistle carved in the shape of a bear. "For calling," he said simply. "When you need to remember when others need to see when the world feels too small, play it, and those who can hear will come." The boy took the whistle reverently, understanding that he had been given something precious, a tool for his work as a young guardian. As they walked home for the last time from the carnival, the town around them looked different. They could see the magic that had always been there, in the way the streetlights created pools of golden possibility, in the way the trees whispered secrets to each other, in the way the very air shimmered with potential. They were the same family who had walked to a carnival years ago with a baby in a stroller. They were also completely transformed, carriers of a vision that would spread throughout their community and beyond. The boy walked between his parents, occasionally skipping, occasionally stopping to examine something only he could fully see. He was 5 years old and ancient. He was a child and a guardian. He was ordinary and magical. He was exactly what the world needed. That night, as they tucked him into bed, he looked up at his parents with those impossible eyes and said, "The bear cub is happy. It says its job is almost done. Soon, there won't need to be guardians at the doorways because everyone will remember how to see. The doors will be everywhere, and everyone will be able to walk through." His parents didn't fully understand what he meant, but they believed him. They had learned to trust his vision, to know that he saw further and clearer than they did. They kissed him good night and left him to his dreams, which they knew were more than dreams. In the weeks that followed, changes rippled through Willow Creek. Children who had seen the bear cub began to notice other things. Hidden gardens that appeared in vacant lots, streams of light that connected house to house, animals that behaved in unexpected ways, as if they were cooperating in some grand design. Adults, influenced by their children's wonder, began to pay attention differently. They noticed synchronicities, experienced moments of unexpected beauty, found themselves believing in possibilities they had dismissed for years. The town was waking up, remembering itself, discovering that it had always been magical. It just needed someone to remind it. The boy grew, but he never outgrew his ability to see. If anything, it got stronger. By the time he was 7, he could show others what he saw just by holding their hand. By the time he was 10, he had taught dozens of other children the huffing sound, the language of connection. By the time he was 13, there was a network of young guardians spread across 3 states, all connected by the golden threads, all working to help the world remember. The tokens his parents had been given were passed on to others who were ready, creating new connections, opening new doorways. The whistle was played in moments of need, and always, always those who could hear would come. And somewhere, traveling the roads between here and there, between the ordinary and the magical, the carnival continued its work. Mr. Fu Holloway and his impossible claw machine, the bear cub at its window between worlds, waiting for the next child who could see, the next family ready to remember. The cycles continued, but each revolution of the wheel brought more awareness, more remembering, more magic seeping back into a world that had almost forgotten it existed. The boy's story became legend, whispered among children, dismissed by adults until they saw it for themselves. The story of a baby who saw a bear cub in a machine and changed everything simply by seeing truly, by connecting across the divide, by refusing to forget what he knew. Years passed. The boy became a young man, still carrying his whistle, still seeing the threads that connected everything. He found others like himself, some who had been awakened by other carnivals, other guardians, other moments of magic breaking through. They worked together, not to bring magic back to the world, but to help the world remember that magic had never left. It had just been waiting, patient as a bear cub in a machine, for someone to see it truly, to reach out their hand, to make the connection that would remind everyone that the world was vast and beautiful and strange and perfectly, impossibly magical. The photograph on his parents' mantel grew older, joined by others, pictures of children at various carnivals, all with their hands pressed to glass, all seeing something beyond the ordinary. A map of awakening, a document of remembering. And in each photograph, if you looked carefully, if you knew how to see, you could make out the golden threads connecting them all, weaving a web of magic that grew stronger with each passing day. The world was waking up, just as the bear cub had said it would. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, gently, one child at a time, one family at a time, one magical moment at a time. And it all started with a baby who saw a bear cub stuck in a carnival game machine and did what babies do best. Reached out with perfect trust, perfect love, perfect recognition that here was a friend, here was magic, here was the world as it really was. He reached out, and in reaching, he reminded everyone that the space between reaching and touching, between seeing and believing, between the ordinary and the magical, was no space at all. It was just a matter of remembering how to see. The bear cub had never been stuck. It had been waiting. Waiting for someone who could see that the glass was not a barrier but a doorway. Waiting for someone who knew that love didn't need words, that connection didn't need explanation, that magic didn't need belief because it simply was. The boy, now grown, still visited carnivals when he could find them. He would stand before claw machines and other impossible attractions, watching children discover what he had discovered, seeing their parents remember what they had forgotten, and sometimes, if the light was right and the moment was perfect, he would see him again. Mr. Holloway, never aging, always smiling, always knowing. They would nod to each other across the crowds, two guardians recognizing each other, acknowledging their shared work of keeping the doorways open until everyone remembered how to walk through them. The carnival would leave, but the magic would remain, spreading like seeds on the wind, taking root in unexpected places, growing into something beautiful and strange and absolutely real. This was the world now, a place where bear cubs lived in claw machines, and no one questioned it because they understood it was exactly right. A place where children taught adults how to see. A place where golden threads connected every living thing, visible to all who remembered to look. A place where magic wasn't something you believed in, but something you participated in. Every moment of every day. And it had all started with a baby's hand pressed against glass, meeting a paw on the other side. Two souls recognizing each other across the beautiful, permeable boundary between worlds. The story never really ended. It just kept spreading, kept growing, kept teaching anyone who would listen that the world was exactly as magical as you allowed it to be. And that was the most magical thing of all.